Coming up on today's episode, we're going to talk about strategic planning for retiree healthcare. We're going to focus on a critical aspect of retirement planning, exactly what are the costs we need to consider when it comes to planning for healthcare, especially in retirement. I want you to think about on today's show how prepared you are to handle medical expenses after you retire, things like Medicare complexities, maybe some of the strategies you should have in place for unexpected healthcare-related expenses that might just pop up along the way. So watch and listen as we break down the essentials of healthcare planning for retirees on today's episode of Rockin' Retirement. Well, Janine, it is great to be back with you for another episode, our first podcast of the new year. So happy 2024 to you. How are you?
Thank you. You too. I'm doing well. Survived the holidays.
Good. Yes, that's the bar, right? We just need to survive it first, and then if we thrive in it, fantastic,
Well, yeah, and this go around was fairly quiet because we didn't have everybody here, so.
Yeah, you've got a big family, so I imagine things get pretty loud when everybody shows up.
Yeah. I mean, it's fun, it's exciting, it's nonstop, and anybody with a big family knows exactly what I'm talking about. So,
yes, for sure.
But yeah, it's great. But yep, new year, new goals, new things to talk about.
Perfect.
So
healthcare going to be at the top of our list today to discuss, and it's a big topic. Any time of year, New Year gives us the chance to maybe put it into a new perspective. If anybody's making New Year resolutions, one good one might be to get your healthcare situation figured out for your future and into retirement. And so that's our goal today, Janine, to break that down and kind of do a deep dive on anything related to healthcare. So perhaps as a starting point, maybe we can begin with just talking about preparation. And the pre-retiree, whether we define that somebody as a couple of years away from retirement, or even if it's still a decade away, if you're just kind of in that pre-retirement stage, let's focus on folks like that first. How prepared is the average pre-retiree for handling healthcare costs that they're going to face in retirement? You're meeting with people every day, so I feel like you've got a good pulse on this.
Yeah, this is one of those topics, action items that a lot of people kick the can down the road. If you have dealt with an elderly parent or an elderly sibling, someone you've had to take care of, it's certainly more front of mind for those folks. But for a lot of people, they just push this down the road because it's very difficult for a lot of people to deal with it. They know what they don't want to do, or at least they think they know what they don't want to do, but they really haven't thought through what is it that I can do, want to do, or what should be done. And so, first and foremost, it's a conversation. A lot of advisors don't like to have this conversation because it's a tough one. You have to be a sounding board, and you have to be willing to push back when people are being unrealistic. I've been to, the last few years, I fly back to take care of my parents. So I know exactly what some people are going through. And, as people age and it might not be full-blown dementia, but you've got memory losses and you've got attitude changes.
Yeah.
And so if you have thin skin, that can be very difficult for you to deal with that or see your parents go down that road. So it's multi-factor when you're dealing with this. So I'm trying to get people to, okay, what do you think you want to have happen?
Okay.
If your words start coming out sideways, what do you want to do?
That's a good way that's a very frank way to put it, right? Yeah. But think about it now and make decisions now before you're in that situation, right?
Yeah. And part of it is, okay, a lot of people, I have a couple, they're relatively young. They said, you know what? We're moving into the continuing care retirement community. So like over 55. So that they moved into that community. Now where they were perfectly close to lots of things, but then they moved into this community because it's just going to be easier for them. There's a lot of things they don't have to worry about. So for some people, that makes a lot of sense. For other people who are, diehard independents, it's a little more challenging when you get to the point that you have to start, giving up things, or I can't get around. So if you can't all of a sudden drive, Who's doing your shopping? Who's going to take you to the doctor's appointments? Who's going to do all these things? Because the last thing you want to have happen is to become a hostage in your own house.
Right, right.
The,
We probably
the one you're
all know someone in our family or extended friendships that have been in that situation.
Yeah.
So it sounds like it sounds like your answer is they're not very prepared for the healthcare expenses in your, your experience.
For a lot of people, they really, most people do want to stay in their own homes. So it's really important to look at what the options are. There are several organizations, companies that serve people in their homes that are licensed. So, looking into what those are and what kind of care do you need? A lot of them will put limitations depending on the area of the country. You can get one organization that'll come in for 1 or 2 hours, a few times a week. Another one wants minimum 4 hours. Okay, so what are these people going to do? So, and then what's the cost?
I want to get into that a little bit more. Let's turn our attention there to those expenses and costs. And can you maybe outline for us some of the most common healthcare related expenses that people are going to probably face in retirement, and which ones have the biggest impact on a retiree's wealth?
Well, you're either going to self-insure with your own money to pay in-home care, or if you have a long-term care policy, what does it cover? What's the benefit? What triggers it? In almost every instance, if you have a long-term care policy, and it doesn't matter what type, it's you all of a sudden can't do 2 of the 6 ADLs, activities of daily living. You can't move yourself, you feed yourself, toilet, you dress, all these things. So, and then cognitive issues. Cognitive issues are the most common, but that will trigger that. But
those become very expensive to treat.
Yes, and so then the question is, if you have somebody who's borderline Alzheimer's, or more dementia related, they can't live by themselves. I mean, if something were to happen to my mother, I know my dad could not live by himself. He can't remember if he ate this morning.
Yeah. So your backup plan can change in a heartbeat. Even.
Exactly. So, you're talking about getting somebody to come into the house for $50 an hour. And that's pretty good, but, minimum 4 hours, times 3 or 4 times a week, times, every month. So what is that going to look like in terms of cost? Now, if you trigger long-term care, a lot of long-term care policies will cover in-home care. So, but is it a reimbursement policy? Is it an indemnity policy? What's out of pocket? What do you have to keep track of? So if you are having a cognitive issue, there's no way you're keeping track of this.
Yeah.
You have to have somebody that you trust that's going to keep track of this and submit. If it's a reimbursable policy, they have to submit receipts. Indemnity is they just give you cash. Well, if you have somebody caring for you that you don't really know and don't really trust, when the cash comes in, where's it going?
Yeah. So it's people probably don't think about that level of just like tracking that needs to be done, and the amount of paperwork somebody could drown underneath of, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Going back to just some of the basic conversation, I always ask, what do you want to have happen if you need care? Because I have a handful of clients who have no children. If you're widowed or divorced, who is your advocate? Not just on the healthcare side, but on the financial side. One of the first faculties that goes in elders is the ability to handle finances. So that's why there are all these scammers out there scamming seniors, because they're, 1, very trusting, but 2, they can't keep track of all of that. So they don't often understand.
And sometimes I would imagine it's not all of the biggest issues that can have an impact on a retiree. What about something smaller and simpler, like prescriptions, as an example? Could you see that even impacting somebody's retirement plan if they haven't kind of just accounted for even just the things that we don't really think about on a daily basis? Yeah,
prescriptions are tough. Unless, of course, the doctor asked me that when I had my dad in recently. And like, who's managing that? And I said, my mother. She's the pill Nazi. So because she's got it all organized in these little bags, and it's morning and night, and but you have to have
it's
somebody.
Twofold. There's the cost, and then also the actual management of the of the
Exactly.
pills. Yeah.
So, you have to have somebody keeping track of meds. And the other part of that issue is who's actually quarterbacking. Like if you're on a lot of meds, who's quarterbacking whether any of these meds are contraindicated?
Yeah.
Because that happened to my mother-in-law years ago. She was on all these meds, and my sister-in-law was asking me, I go, you need a doctor to basically, I'm not a doctor, but you need to have somebody go through this because I'd be willing to bet nobody's tracking what these different doctors are prescribing. So, I mean, that's the value of the electronic health record, typically, if you're in a system, that it's going to track some of that. But you still have to ask.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of people have developed really important relationships with their pharmacists just because they might be seeing, 5, 6 different doctors for various ailments and things like that. And sometimes those doctors, they can be in the zone on their particular issue that they're handling. And some of that stuff, if they're not diligent, can slip through the cracks. And so kind of like a little secret is get a really good pharmacist to help you analyze all those different moving parts, because I guess they can see the whole picture, and at least it's their job to analyze that more closely than the doctors looking at their slice of the pie.
Yeah, so, but you're right, and that really needs to be done. And I'll tell you that if unless people ask, they're not going to be as proactive. I mean, they have to. And this is what I'm hearing from my doctor clients is, they're paid based on how many patients they can see. So the insurance companies and big pharma are kind of driving the relationship now between patient and doctor. So they only have so much time. Now, the good ones are going to spend the time with you, but to the degree that you are your own advocate or somebody becomes your advocate, it's so important because, for instance, a couple of years ago when my dad had a stroke, the vascular surgeon who came in to talk with him at the hospital, I'm not joking, was speaking 90 miles an hour. Highly technical. I can
believe that story, sure.
90 miles an hour. And I had to stop him. I'm like, Doc, you're talking to an 88-year-old. And I recently just had to tell a nurse, because I said, did you talk to my mother? Yes, I talked to your mother. And we told her all this stuff for your dad. And I said, okay, so here's the deal. She's not going to understand half of what you say, and she's not going to remember the other half. So. Yeah.
That is really tough. I've seen that same struggle with my grandmother's health problems lately. She's, still doing well, super sharp mentally, but has had a lot of physical ailments. Unfortunately, just causing her to now be in kind of an assisted living facility, and hopefully she doesn't have to go to that next level up. But she's had some falls, and anytime she has something and goes to the hospital, it's just really difficult for all of that communication to trickle down to the rest of the family who's trying to be helpful. And it's just a tough situation to try and figure all that out. So you're hearing, it's like a game of telephone by the time you're hearing about what's going on. And then people are calling my wife because she's in the medical field and seeking her advice and guidance on the pain meds and other things. And so it can be really tough when there's an emergency, or even just with the regular maintenance, to try to continue to give that help to your parents or to your loved ones when both of them, maybe the couple, both are having trouble understanding and keeping up with it all, as you've seen. You have to kind of come in there and be that other force that's like, hey, hold on. Yes, they technically are their own decision makers still, but like, I need to help them. Please.
Yeah, I mean, it is really interesting, and you get mixed results when you challenge someone in the medical community. I mean, there's some who are very good at slowing down and explaining things really well, and others that are just their personality, whatever they do, they're in, they're out, and they're like, you need to get this, and then they're out. And I'm like, no, you need to stop and slow down and explain this more fully, because obviously, like you said, it's the telephone line, what information can be passed so that family can make a decision. So going back to, do people plan for this? Unless you've been through it, people typically don't really know. I mean, you just don't know how this is going to play out.
Okay.
How healthy are you? What is the longevity in your family? Are you on different medications that can cause a situation where you're going to have they're helping you now, but they might shorten your life. But nobody's telling you that. So,
it is not a perfect system, for sure. And speaking of non-perfect systems, I think this is a great segue because you spend a lot of time talking about really that bigger picture healthcare issue and long-term care needs and potential needs. So let's go back to that for a moment. A lot of people will say, all right, well, I'll just fix this problem by getting long-term care insurance. So when folks come to you with that sort of solution, or they've heard that that's the way forward, or they're just seeking your opinion on it, how do you usually respond? And do you have general advice for when it comes to trying to cover all these issues with long-term care insurance?
Well, first and foremost, I tell people that long-term care is a conversation first with family. Because what do you want to have happen? I think the statistic is about 70%, 75% of those over 65 are going to have some kind of long-term care situation.
Yeah.
So
it's
people are living longer. Yeah. So there's going to be something. So what does that look like potentially? You can either self-insure for the cost, or you can push the risk to an insurance company. So what does that look like? Well, everybody's familiar with the usual long-term care policy is very much like a property and casualty. You pay every month or every year, and you hope you never use it.
Yeah.
And people are like, oh, I don't want to waste this money. I go, well, it's not a waste if you end up in care. I think there's some misconceptions for a lot of people. They think that Medicare will cover long-term care. It doesn't. What happens is if you go into the hospital and then you are sent to essentially rehab, where you need care outside of the hospital, Medicare will cover 100 days total. So the first 20 days are covered at 100%. The remaining 80 days are covered at 80%, basically. But it's not built for 6 months recovery or a year, or it's not meant for terminal care. So Medicare is not going to cover that. So you're either going to pay for it yourself, or you're going into a Medicaid facility. And the rules were changed so that you don't have to impoverish a spouse. It used to be you had to spend all of your assets down to $2,500. Now I think you can leave a spouse about $104. That's still not a lot. But you have to understand what the rules are that you're working with so that you can plan properly. There are now asset-based long-term care policies, which are very effective, especially if you do have assets, because you can use IRA money to purchase a long-term care policy, and then when the money comes out for benefits, it's tax-free.
Well, that's nice use of that money and those dollars.
Yeah, so there's a way to structure that so that works in your favor, overall. So, but you really have to sit down and walk through this so that you get a better feel for, okay, this is what I want to do with my assets.
So you've got you've got a tool belt to help solve this healthcare problem, right. And on that tool belt, you've got things like HSAs, the right. ability to adjust asset allocation inside of a portfolio, the use of an IRA, as you just mentioned, to maybe supplement to a policy and get some tax benefits out of it. Supplemental, Medicare supplements in addition to the base Medicare. So are you just pretty much, when you put together a retirement plan for somebody and it comes to this healthcare piece, you're just kind of using all those different tools to sort of build this piece of the house, this room of that financial house?
That's right, because one product does not fit everybody. I mean, everybody's situation is unique. Those with a lot of assets need to plan properly, because do you want to leave it to heirs? Well, if you do, then the question becomes, all right, how much are you going to use for you? And then how much are you going to leave to the IRS?
Yeah.
Just depending on how your assets are positioned. If they're all in qualified plans, IRAs, 401ks, et cetera, you're going to be leaving a lot. If you leave it to heirs, you're going to be actually giving a lot to the IRS, unless you plan properly. And people aren't always hearing that. So
that's the default.
That's the default. So, planning for care is really important. And now we have a tax play to be able to do that. But getting people to really sit down and thoroughly look at what they want to have happen, where they end up, where they want to be when they can no longer, scoot around the neighborhood.
Yep.
It's a really important question or conversation.
Scoot around the neighborhood. You always have a great way of just simplifying whatever the problem is that we're talking about. Do you want to scoot around the neighborhood some more, or when that day comes when you can't, what do you want to have happen? Well, that's the crux of the conversation. So.
I don't know. I saw a video recently of, I think these guys were down in the villages, all these old guys.
Oh, the golf carts?
No. Well, yeah, they're in golf carts. But these guys are doing line dancing it, and they're doing it to some rapper song.
Oh, my gosh.
I was like, what are they listening to? Tupac? I go, I'm not going to the villages.
Oh, that's too funny.
It was pretty funny.
Whatever floats your boat, right?
Yeah.
That's too funny. Well, they don't make them the same down in Florida. We all know that, right? Florida man exists for a reason.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Well, good stuff. Well, great breakdown on healthcare, and it just seems to really come back to the default is you're going to need probably some long-term care assistance in retirement between you and your spouse, one or maybe both of you at some point in time. The statistics are not in our favor when it comes to that. And if you don't have a plan, you can pretty much bet on the fact that your assets are going to get drained significantly. And so you got to put a plan together if you don't want that to be the consequence. And so if you want to talk to Janine about that, the healthcare piece is just part of the overall planning process. It's very easy to get in touch. Let me give folks the ways to do that, Janine. They can go to theuswealthadvisors.com. That's theuswealthadvisors.com, or call 443-718-6311. Again, that's 443-718-6311. Either way, we'll get you in touch with Janine, allow you to set up a time to meet, see if you're a good fit to work with one another, and let Janine kind of lay out just how effective a full-blown financial plan might be for your situation. No cost or obligation to chat and have that initial visit, so just do that if you have not put together a solid financial plan, or if you just find yourself not very confident in your retirement future for an issue like healthcare. If you don't know how that's going to get handled, it means you probably need to have a conversation about it with somebody who's been through it with many clients before and knows how to structure the right plans. Janine's the CEO and founder of Theus Wealth Advisors, and we're also going to link to the description, in the description of today's show, the ways that you can get in touch with her. So find that contact information very easily there. Well, Janine, thank you so much for your help on the podcast today. Really enjoyed catching up with you. Welcome to 2024 once again, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks so much, Walter. Bye.
Appreciate it. We'll talk to everybody next time right back here on Rockin' Retirement. Busier than ever and on a mission. See you next time.
Information is for illustrative purposes only and does not constitute tax, investment, or legal advice. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal, or tax professional before taking any action.